My girlfriend is missing, but no one seems to think she exists. We are going to call her Abby for the story, mostly because I'm trying to collect myself and figure out what is happening. You see, at this moment, Abby and I have been dating for 13 months, 5 days, and 12 hours. Something she likes to remind me of. I always found it kinda cute that she remembered the detail. Needless to say, we've been in a happy relationship. The strange thing, though, is that Abby went missing as of 28 hours ago, and I have not been able to find her. What is making this whole ordeal more concerning is everyone that she knew is claiming they have never heard of her. I'm going to walk you through the events to show you that I'm not crazy, that a girl named Abby did in all actuality exist, because something very weird is going on right now, and everyone is treating me like I'm crazy. I've tried contacting the police, but she hasn't been missing for more than 48 hours yet, so they have very little interest at this time. I can only hope that you actually believe me as I walk you through these events. It all started when I went to pick up Abby from work for our weekly dinner date. We always loved to get sushi once a week. I stopped by her office where she worked as an architect. I could tell by her text messages that it had been quite the day. Usually we text throughout the day, but today her texts were sporadic, and sometimes dismissive. I just figured her boss was working her hard and she had lots of clients. When I arrived at her office, I saw her work friend Lisa, who was leaving the building. She gave me a smile and a wave as she passed by. I waited a few moments in the car and finally noticed Abby leaving the building. She seemed a little distracted as she was frantically texting on the phone. She walked over to the car and opened the door, leaned over and gave me a kiss on the cheek. She received a text message and sent a quick reply, then proceeded to tuck her phone back into her purse. She was noticeably tense. Something was not quite right. "Everything okay, sweetie?" "Just a lot of work stuff," she replied. We stayed mostly silent on our drive to the sushi place. She would occasionally grab my hand and hold it. When we made it to the restaurant, we sat down at a booth and talked for a little bit. We ordered our favorites and ate our food. It was quite delicious. Her spirits seemed to lift with every bite. She started smiling again and started to open back up. I noticed something strange from the corner of my eye, though. There was a man about our age with dark brown hair looking at us across the restaurant. He sat there just sipping his drink and occasionally would take a bite of food. "Do you know that guy?" I asked. Abby turned around and looked at the guy across the restaurant. He lifted his glass as if he was saying hello. She turned back to me with a look of shock written across her face. She left our table and went over to the man. They seemed to be well acquainted with the way they were interacting. I sat at our table wondering what they were talking about. After a little bit, she came back to the table and sat down. "Do you know him?" I asked. "Just a friend from college." We decided to take the rest of our food to go and hopped into the car to start driving home. As we drove, Abby suggested that we stop by her parents as it was on the way back. We drove by Abby's parents' house. It was a red brick house that they had lived in since Abby was born. When we walked to the door, we knocked, but it didn't seem like anyone was home. After a few minutes, we got back into the car and went back to my place. When we arrived at my place and started to settle in, Abby's phone started to ring. She looked at the screen, and I noticed her demeanor changed again. She went back to being closed off and quiet, hardly making eye contact with me. After a few more minutes, her phone started to ring again. I noticed that Abby was becoming more distressed. "I need to go check on some things," she said. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Do you want a ride?" "Everything is fine. I'll take an Uber and see you tomorrow." After a little bit, Abby left my apartment and I decided it was time to call it a night and fell asleep. The next morning, I tried to text Abby. I waited for a bit, but never received a reply back. Even on the worst days, she would always reply back, but something was different. After sitting around my place for a bit, I decided I should try to cheer her up and surprise her at work with some flowers. I dressed and grabbed my keys, then headed to my car. When I first sat down in my car, I noticed there was a strange smell coming from somewhere in my car. I looked around in the back seat and noticed that we had left the sushi leftovers in the car overnight and they were starting to smell. It was a horrid smell, but I would take care of it later. I mapped out a flower shop on my way to Abby's work and sent one more text message. I received no reply, so I headed off. After a short stop at the flower shop, I made it to Abby's work with a bouquet of white roses. They were always her favorite. As I walked into the building, I started to walk towards Abby's workspace when her friend Lisa walked up to me. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm just here to see Abby." Lisa looked at me blankly for a couple of seconds. "We don't have anyone that works here by that name, sir." "We were just here yesterday." Lisa looked around the office and seemed confused at first. She made eye contact with a person who looked like security, and he started to make his way towards us. I just stood there confused because Abby had always worked here. Now I was being told that she did not. It was strange because we always talked about her job, and now our work friend Lisa was saying she didn't even work here. "I just want to drop these off for Abby," I said. "I told you, we do not have anyone here that goes by that name, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The security guard arrived and pointed towards the door. I was too shocked to say anything and turned around. The security guard stayed behind me to make sure I actually left. My brain was going all sorts of places, but more than anything, I was just worried about Abby. As I walked out the door, I looked back to see the security guard. "If we see you hanging outside of here again, we will call the police," he yelled. I had this sinking feeling that something bad had happened to Abby. But why would her place of work throw me out? I had to figure this out, so I started up my car and decided to drive towards her family. I thought they would have an idea what was going on with Abby. All the while, my brain kept going to the worst places. Where was Abby, and was she in some kind of trouble? When I arrived at the parents' house, I noticed her mother was outside watering her plants. I was relieved they were actually home, so I parked my car in the driveway and exited. When her mother looked at me, I noticed she had a strange look on her face. She immediately went inside the house, and when I started to walk towards the door opened violently, and suddenly coming from it was Abby's father holding a baseball bat. "Where is Abby?" "We're tired of you coming around. Stay the hell away from here," he yelled. He started to walk towards me aggressively. Something was different about Abby's parents. I had never seen this side of them before. They were always so warm and polite when I stopped by the house with Abby. Now her mother was running away from me, and her father was walking menacingly towards me with a weapon. I knew Abby was in trouble at this moment, and what was worse was everybody seemed to be in on it. "I just want to help Abby!" I screamed. "We do not know anyone named Abby!" He started to walk faster towards me, and I quickly made my way back to my car. As I put the keys in and started it, he started hitting my car with his bat. I quickly pulled out of the driveway and drove as far as I could from the house. I pulled over and decided to try Abby one more time. I sent her a text message as I debated whether to call the police. I received nothing back. I just sat in the car and noticed that the smell was getting worse. But I didn't have time to deal with that. I was more concerned with what had possibly happened to my girlfriend. I called the police and tried to explain that my girlfriend had disappeared, but because she had been missing less than 48 hours, they had no interest. That is when it dawned on me. The one thing that was very out of place last night was the man from the sushi restaurant. The man that Abby claimed was just a college friend. If I could find him, then maybe I could find her. I drove to the sushi restaurant and went inside. I asked for the exact table that we had the night before. I proceeded to order some food and just waited to see if maybe the man would return. After about an hour of waiting, I noticed the man walked in. He then proceeded to sit at the same table from last night. I looked across the room, but he wasn't even acknowledging me. I decided I had to confront him, and I left my table, then walked over to him. "Can I help you?" the man asked. "What did you do with Abby?" He furrowed his brow and tried to feign a puzzled look. I knew something was off about this man when he looked back up and gave me a sinister smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." Something in me just snapped, and I lunged at the man. He seemed genuinely shocked. I grabbed his shirt and started to shake him violently. This man knew what had happened to my girlfriend, and he wasn't telling me. He was hiding something about Abby, and I was going to force it out of him. "Tell me what you did with Abby," I screamed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Around that time, a couple of employees from the restaurant grabbed me and pulled me off the man. I tried to fight them off, but the man quickly ran away. I continued to struggle as I watched him exit the building. This was my one chance to find out what had happened to Abby, and I managed to break free after a few moments. I exited the building in my pursuit of the man. I looked around, but he was nowhere to be found. I decided I would hop in my car and just drive around the area until I could find him again. Then maybe I would get the answers I needed. I pulled my keys out of my pocket and decided to make my way to the car. When I walked over to my parking spot, I noticed 2 police officers were coming up behind me. That was more than 15 minutes ago, and I am now sitting in the back of a squad car. After a brief search of my car, I noticed they called a few more police to the area. What is troubling is one of them looks like the detective type. They occasionally look back at me with a weird look, but something isn't quite right. As I sit here panicking and worried about my girlfriend of 13 months, 5 days, and now 13 hours, I realize no one is going to help me. I notice a detective is walking over to me. He has a stern and serious look on his face. He opens the door of the squad car and just stares me down. "Do you want to explain the badly decomposing body in your trunk?"